hello from my home and office now. My name is Richie Epping. I am currently the legal director at the American Civil Liberties Union of Idaho, the ACLU of Idaho. This event today is part of the Idaho Law Review Symposium, which this year is focused on mass incarceration. I'm here with Chris Shanahan and Patrick Irving, who will be your featured speakers for this hour. And I think this is probably a first for the Law Review Symposium, and maybe a first for Law Review Symposiums across the country. I attend and speak at my fair share of legal conferences and symposiums like this on all kinds of topics, whether it's about disability law or immigration law or criminal law, mass incarceration, you name it. And at these events, you hear from people like lawyers and judges who design and operate these systems of law, and you hear from scholars who study these systems. But for all of those people, these legal systems are a profession. They're a paying job. They're part of their lives and only just a part of it. But you almost never, ever, ever hear from the people who don't have a turn it off switch, the people who live these systems every single minute, hour, month, year, and decade of their lives. And these are folks who have more experience with these systems, with the mass incarceration system, than any of us. They're the real experts. And the mass incarceration system, indeed, where the Law Review has put its focus, is perhaps the most daunting and profound of our legal systems of all. If the time comes that the world looks back on this country, including the state of Idaho, I think that we will be known, what we will be known for is for putting human beings into cages. All of us together in the United States, we have incarcerated more people than any other society in the world by a long shot. This country makes up just 5% of the world's population, and yet we imprison more than half of the people who are imprisoned across the globe. And one of the primary things that our system of mass incarceration does is it atomizes and isolates, and it makes invisible the people who are incarcerated. Even in the court system itself, we hardly ever hear from people who are imprisoned. Reginald Dwayne Betts, who is a poet and a lawyer and one of so many Black men that our society has imprisoned, put it like this: these court proceedings are where the state turns men, women, children into numbers. The late Ninth Circuit Judge John Noonan, some of you may remember John Noonan, the Catholic lion of the federal judiciary, wrote a whole book about what Reginald Dwayne Betts talks about, called Persons and Masks of the Law, where he explained, this is what Judge Noonan said: by masks, I mean the ways of classifying human beings so that their humanity is hidden and disavowed. By mask, I mean the legal constructs suppressing the humanity of a participant in the process. And it was Judge Noonan's conclusion in that book that is our endeavor today in this panel. He said, the central problem of the legal enterprise is the relation of love to power. We can apply force to those we do not see, but we cannot, I think, love them. Only in the response of person to person can Augustine's sublime fusion be achieved, in which justice is defined as love, serving only the one loved. So it's at this point in the symposium on mass incarceration that we are going to hear from two of the experts on mass incarceration. With me today are Patrick Irving and Chris Shanahan. They have both written pieces for the Idaho Law Review Symposium. It's a print edition on mass incarceration, and today we will hear directly from them. And I want to save the rest of the time that we have today so that we can hear from them. And we will hopefully have a little time towards the end of the hour for some questions. So to give them the maximum amount of time, they will introduce themselves and share their perspectives on mass incarceration here in Idaho. And I'll turn it over first to Chris. Thank you both.
Well, I would like to just start by thanking everybody for being here, and I really appreciate you taking the time to not only everyone who is putting this on, but people that are attending and are participating in this conversation. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your time. My name's Chris. I've just finished my 25th year of incarceration. I have a sentence of 35 to life, and I've really experienced a pretty a wide variety of things the prison system has to offer. I would like to start by acknowledging that I did something to get myself here. And in my case, I committed a terrible crime, and I caused a tremendous amount of damage, of irreparable damage to my victim, whose life I took, to her family, to the community, to my own family. And so I just want to acknowledge that I understand that I initiated this process for myself, and I subjected many innocent people to the impacts of my behavior and my crime. And so, but I think that brings us to the conversation today, which is, what do we do? What do we do when people do terrible things? And in my case, I was 15 years old, almost 16 when I committed my crime. And like I said, it was a horrible decision that I made, and it's had consequences that can never be, like I said, I can never give back what I've taken. And that's a difficult thing for me to deal with. And I can only imagine for the people in the community, in the legal profession, the criminal justice system, I can only imagine the question that presents them for what do we do when somebody like this, a 15-year-old kid, does this terrible thing. And unfortunately, crime's a reality of our daily life. But I think, and we can't necessarily control that. Obviously, we try to do things that can help prevent it. That's part of why I'm so appreciative of this opportunity, is understanding that I can never give back what I've taken. I still feel very responsible to do everything that I can and to make the most good come out of this experience. And if there is any way that I can do something, share part of my experience to improve this system, it's with the hope that somehow that will prevent future victims from being made, and that will help to create safer communities and hopefully put me in a better position to give back and try to help out and contribute in some way. But so I just wanted to, I think it's important that I acknowledge that. But a question is, I was thinking about what is important for me to share? What can I contribute to this conversation? And a thing that I imagine a lot of people out there might think, who don't have a loved one or a family member or a professional interest in criminal justice, is, why does it matter? Why does it matter to them? And, why should they care about somebody who has done a thing like I have, or like Patrick? And, there are many reasons, but a few that came to my mind is, number one, what happens in the criminal justice system is done with your tax dollars. So you have a vested interest in the way that those tax dollars are used. But there's much more important reason, and it's because not only is your well-being at stake, but the well-being of your family and your friends and your loved ones. Because the statistics that would say that 95% of people that are incarcerated, a lot of times, and in many of other areas, sometimes it feels, from my perspective, that there's a lack of attention. And I just wanted to say that I just got a notice that the connection might be unstable. So Richie, would you let me know if I drop off?
Yeah,
please,
you kind of faded out a little bit there for a second, but it sounds like you're back on strong now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry about that. But so my feeling is, my hope is that this conversation can help everything about the criminal justice system and the many processes and philosophies and policies that go into its operation, that it can be done as intentionally as possible. And in my case, and I think this is the case for many people in Idaho who commit a crime and enter the criminal justice system, my judge told me that his sentencing aims were the protection and the good order of society, deterrence for myself and for other people, rehabilitation, but he also felt that it was important that my rehabilitation not overshadow my victims and the community's right to retribution. And that retribution is something I've really struggled with. I have a tremendous amount of guilt and remorse for the damage that I've caused, and I struggle with that every day. What to do with that? How do I deal with that? How do I come to terms with something that I can't take back and that I can't repay? And so it's something that I think a lot about. And when I was given the invitation to write an article for the Law Review, the retribution is really what stuck out to me, because deterrence makes sense to me. Rehabilitation makes sense, and I really hope to get in and share some of my thoughts and experiences on that. And obviously the protection, the good order of society makes the most sense, and I understand that. And in my case, it was necessary. But again, for how long? And you know, and how do we mix in these different sentencing aims? And so what I hope to do is share some of my experiences being in the system, some things that I've seen with other people, and I hope to be able to tie some of this in and kind of move through that, work through that towards the end of this conversation. But to go a little bit more in depth with my personal experience, I committed my crime when I was 15, like I said, almost 16. I was in county jail for a year and a half. In that time, I was placed in a 2-man cell. There was no window. There was no rec yard. I was allowed out only for short 15 minutes, visits with my family through glass that was about the size of 2 decks of playing cards. It was an extremely traumatic time for my family, for myself, and it was a difficult place to be. And I spent approximately a year and a half in those conditions. You know, I was shackled and belly chained everywhere I went. And I had I go into more detail in the article that I wrote, but it was a traumatic time. That transition, I got sentenced when I was 17. The day I was sentenced, I was transported to the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. I was charged as an adult. I was charged as an adult, sentenced as an adult, and taken to max the day that sentence was imposed. I spent 4 years in that facility, and that was a lot of my own doing. I would have been there for 6 months. I committed a couple of assaults over there, and I explained some of the reasoning behind that.
Chris, there you come.
But simply, it was survival. It was a difficult time, you know, for a 17-year-old kid to learn. I was there for 4 years. I was in ADSEG for 7 months due to some of my behavior. I was able to work myself out of max eventually. Like I said, it took 4 years, and that was almost entirely due to the support of my family and relationships that I had. And so that's something I really hope to highlight, is the importance of relationships, and not only family, but also in the correction.
Is that us?
No.
It's on his end.
Relationships, community volunteers, just across, had a very different philosophy years ago. And at that time, I felt that I was warehoused and there weren't a lot of options or opportunities for me. Or other men, there was a lot of uncertainty. I'm really happy to be able to say that IDOC has come a long way, and I go more into that in the article that I wrote. There's some really positive things happening, but hopefully if I have time, I'll highlight some of those. But it was overall, prison has been a traumatic experience, and I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot through it, but it has been, in many cases, despite the environment that I've been in and the circumstances, and it's been a struggle. And my hope is that through conversations like this, we can all do our part to help create a process from the laws that we write and enact, to the sentences and the legal processes that we create and that we impose, to the way that we carry out corrections and the sentences that have been imposed. And so that the system is working in a way to support what I believe is a very, I'm seeing more of this in the correctional setting, but I think, I hope to see more of it from legislation to reentry efforts in the community, but is to the restoration of citizens. And I feel like, according to, Idaho code, with the unified sentence and some of the guidelines that have been handed down by the legislature, retribution's a really important part of that, according to that code. And there's actually a part in it that inspired my article where it said that humanitarian considerations in rehabilitation are important, but that they can't be allowed to control or outweigh punishment or retribution. And that really, really caught me. And that's what really spurred a lot of this thought process for myself. And because I believe that a lot of the attitudes that support retribution and a lot of the policies that result from that philosophy have actually caused a lot of the harm and a lot of the inefficiencies and the overburdening of the system that we see. And so hopefully I do a little better job of highlighting some of those things in this article, and hopefully some of you will be able to read that. But I just want to speak a little bit to some of the things that I've seen in here. And the system, I don't know if they call it overcrowded right now or not, but it is stressed. It is swollen, it's bloated. There seems to be a sincere desire from my perspective. IDOC's trying to do what they can to help guys and to treat guys and rehabilitate guys. There's just so much need, and there's so few resources for that need. And I think that's a big problem. It goes from the laws that we write, the legislation that's written, to the sentences that are imposed and why those sentences are imposed, to what treatment efforts are given once a person is in the system, what is effective. I think right now Idaho's recidivism rate is 35%. I've been told that a large portion of that are parole violators. And I've seen that. I see guys coming in on, they violated parole on technical violations, most not on new charges. And they come and they spend a year or 2 years in the system, and I don't know what the annual cost is, but I imagine it's at least $20,000 or $30,000 per person. And so I see things like this and I ask myself, is this the most effective use of taxpayer dollars? Is this the most effective use of a year or 2 years of these individuals' lives? Is incarceration the answer for those people and for many others? And if it is, for how long, and for what reasons? And again, I think that retribution, in my mind, I hope to see go away as one of our primary motivations, because I think that it is counterproductive. I'm just kind of looking over some of the talking points that I hope to cover. And one of it is, I see guys in here that when they do commit a new crime, I've seen people in here on paraphernalia crimes. They have a drug addiction, and they're sentenced to sentences like 2 to 7 years. I see people commit crimes, they're serving 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And my thought is not, do they deserve a prison sentence, but it's, why are they serving a prison sentence? What's the reason for it? And sometimes these numbers just seem so arbitrary and random. Is it at 10 years, this person, that covers the debt that that this person caused through, by committing his crime, his behavior, is that the day that this guy becomes rehabilitated? And I know it's a complex question, and it's a case-by-case issue, but I do believe that the sentencing philosophies that we're using to impose these type of sentences are important, and that it's something that I hope there's a lot more conversation about. I want to really talk about a few things in the system that have been really impactful for me. And I mentioned relationships, and I can't stress the importance of family and friends, but also the support of community volunteers, of correctional staff, correctional administration staff. People have made the biggest difference in my life. I've thought about the things that I've done. I've reflected about the things I've done. I've asked myself questions about who do I want to be? What do I want to do? What do I want my legacy in this world to be? Do I want it to be this terrible thing that I did when I was 15? And absolutely not. But people making investments in me personally has been the most powerful experience I've had in my life. And I just want to encourage everybody here. I think everybody has a unique opportunity. You're uniquely qualified. You're uniquely positioned to make your unique contribution, and it matters. And I just, a specific shout out to some of the people that have really impacted me and changed the trajectory of my life. For one, I want to thank IDOC for creating a lot of opportunities that didn't exist 5-10 years ago. And one of those opportunities for me was the BSU ISCC debate initiative. And that debate class changed my life. And the people in that class changed my life. To come into an environment like this and invest in my life and the lives of other people, it was so much more than a debate class for me and for many of the guys I was with. I had an opportunity to participate in a creative writing project. Same thing, incredible opportunity, incredible people that invested in me and others. And they helped me through so many of the debilitating effects that I've experienced through years of my incarceration. And so I want to say thank you to all of those people, but I also want to encourage everybody to do what they can where they're at and get involved in the system. Care about people, invest in people. It's important. You matter, people matter. But I want to talk about the power of opportunities. And Richie, I hope you'll let me know when I get close. I don't want to run over into Patrick's time. But for myself, opportunity has been everything. And I had an opportunity to participate in a cognitive self-change program years ago. And it helped me beyond my ability to express, to understand what I've done, the way I've impacted other people, some of the reasoning behind that. And we need more programs and more treatment and opportunity like that. People in here are broken and they need help, and we've done terrible things. And I guess if I could urge people, please don't get caught in the reaction. The system has an opportunity in how it decides to respond to those who do terrible things. And it doesn't excuse the terrible things that we do, but it's a question that I'm left with often of, do I make a bad situation worse or do I start to make it better? And I think we start making it better by practicing responsible legislation, responsible sentencing practices, responsible treatment in the correctional setting, and then hopefully by setting people up to be restored to the community, to rejoin the community. I personally know many individuals who have gotten out and inspired many of us in here. Mark Person with the Peer Wellness Program and the Day One Project. He did time. He's a felon. He got out. He created this program. He picks people up their first day released from prison. He helps them get their food box, their clothing, their vouchers. He helps them get on their feet for the first day. Kyle Shockey, another former inmate, he got out and set up a nonprofit reentry program. And the reason I bring these guys up is These to me are examples of the resources and the assets that are in the system that caused the trauma to begin with, and now they're part of the solution. And it's the momentum for that is growing. IDOC has been incredibly supportive of peer mentor programs, of the Free to Succeed mentor program in the community that helps people reentering, which, by the way, is primarily composed of returning citizens that have done prison time. The recidivism rate, I talk about it in my article, drops from 35% to 4% for those who have had a mentor. So my hope is, obviously things need to happen when crime is committed, but don't forget that people can change, and people do change. And with the right support and putting people in the best position to change, they do, and they can be a resource that you can welcome into your community and that can be an ally and an asset for you. So that's a really important thing I wanted to cover and I wanted to share. And I wanted to it's not perfect, and are related to restorative justice concepts. And the more that they are included in our policies, the better things are getting, and the more sincere, genuine buy-in people on my side of the fence have. And the more opportunity that's created, the more people are stepping up to make the most of that. And so there's some powerful and very positive and inspiring things that are happening that I hope we can put some energy and attention to. But also, I don't want to overshadow the problems that I realize exist. And again, we're talking about mass incarceration. I really bring that back to legislation, sentencing practices, treatment, people that are being released. And so one last thing, Richie, I'm not sure where we're at time-wise.
Getting right there, Chris,
what?
Right on time.
Oh, okay, I'll end on this. Everyone in the audience, everybody listening, you matter, and your contribution matters. Ways that you can help are to get involved in your community, get involved in the criminal justice system in whatever way that might be. Help inform, educate those around you for why these issues matter and how they impact them when they might not realize it. And most importantly, we need responsible sentencing practices that don't throw people away, that help to rehabilitate and support and help support change for those people. So please support legislation, positive legislation that will help to change the criminal justice system and work on some of these issues we're talking about. Help draft it, help support it, help pass it. Thank you so much for your time. And I just really appreciate this opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Chris. And you know, as Chris indicated, Chris was worried about going over time. You were right, perfectly on the nose. So great work.
Thanks, talking Broncos.
I see that a few people have found the Q&A button on your Zoom. That's the way to put questions in today. So we will have some time after Patrick gets time to speak here to put some questions to both Chris and Patrick. So if you've got questions, go ahead and put them in there, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. But Patrick, without any further ado, let me give you the next 15-20 minutes to share with us your perspectives.
Thank you, Richie. Let me first say, Chris, that was beautiful. I appreciate your articulation, the concerns and the sentiment that you passed on to your victims and the issues that you see present. And thank you for attending this symposium with me, and thank everyone else in the audience for being here. Might have to ask you to bear with me. I'm presenting to you from the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, from the ADSEG portion of our facility. It's a restricted housing unit. I've had very limited social interaction for the last 16 months. I could probably use some exercise with my discourse. So getting that out of the way. Thank you for your patience. I am currently serving a 40-year sentence for 2 counts of arson on an occupied dwelling. To reiterate a little bit the feeling that Chris previously expressed to you, having traumatized people and terrorized people, is very difficult. It's very difficult to do them any justice with any form of apology. And I just like to honor my victims at this moment and acknowledge that. And if possible, it's a rough thing to do. I'm sure other folks could understand that. My experience that I'll be presenting to you is probably going to take place in a chronological fashion. I have experience with private prisons in and out of state. I have experience presenting group issues and the difficulties that come with that, censorship, obstruction, retaliation. I have experience existing in a maximum security facility with some of the most problematic inmates and sections of that facility where people that could use therapeutic programming and behavioral incentives the most are receiving none and are being let out back into the community, finishing their sentences without any supervision to join you as your neighbors. So I will do my best as I present, not to charge anything emotionally. It's difficult to do at times with some of the subject matter. And I realize everybody has their opinions. There's plenty to have. So if I could just walk you along my experience, maybe that would be best. 2014, a bout of mental illness. I failed to seek treatment the way a responsible individual should. Fell into a drug-induced psychosis. Committed my crime. A year later, 2015, I was sentenced for it. 15 to 25 years. I have no qualms with my sentence. The only concern I have is that my victims are able to see how I spend it, as I'm not able to contact them, and that I'm able to atone properly for the trauma that I caused them. So 2015, I arrived at the Idaho State Correctional Institution, or Idaho State Correctional Center, pardon me. And for 2.5 years, I just kind of existed there. I wasn't very happy with myself. I had no future as far as I was concerned. I had no motivation other than to try and essentially, I suppose you'd say I was trying to clog some arteries and give myself a heart attack and check out early. I wasn't engaging in very healthy behaviors. I wasn't exactly living. I was just disappointed with myself. I was fortunate in that I had family support. My mother would come and visit me on the weekends. My father would send me materials. I was able to reach out to people on the phone, but I was still reeling from what I had done and from my psychological experience and recovering from that. The family support that I had in Idaho and having family close by was, I feel like, is essential to keep me from harming myself or engaging in disruptive behaviors. I maintained my status, my behavior. I was able to exist without creating any problems in my environment, no disciplinary issues. And in 2018, my good behavior qualified me to be shipped to Texas, to an out-of-state facility there. We had signed a contract with the GEO group. The stipulations in the contract at that point in time allowed GEO group to handpick the inmates that they wanted to house at their facilities. This was due to overflowing in Idaho. And I was on the first group to go down there with about 150 other inmates. We essentially learned that we were moving all at the same time. I myself was watching the 4 o'clock news. They made the announcement. I didn't hear it from the department until after the news. About 10 minutes later, a cart showed up at my door. I was taken to a staging area with approximately 150 other people separated into 2 units. We were given a small briefing about the facility that we'd be going to in Texas. We were told that we had 2 weeks to make arrangements with our loved ones, have them come from wherever they need to come from, make it quick. Those 2 weeks didn't happen. 3 days later, we were on a plane and we were sent to Texas. The facility that we arrived at was a dilapidated, worn out, short-term housing facility. It was last-minute arrangement. The department was in a rush to do what they could. We arrived down there. We were being housed with Texas State, people waiting to go to Texas State Corrections. We were being housed with immigration holds. We were being housed with federal inmates. There were females at our facility. It was a traumatic experience being sent down there. I understand conditions are bad at prisons all over the place. I could I could go into detail on what we were experienced, but I feel like that's something. I feel like we probably still had it pretty good compared to what goes on in other places. What I will say is that there was a lot of issues with rust, flooding, mold, cockroaches, rats. The rec equipment that we had a pull-up bar that would slice up your hands. We had a volleyball court that was on asphalt. We had a basketball hoop without a net. And I understand we're being disciplined, and I understand that, we certainly deserve to be sentenced, but there was just not a whole lot of reason to behave with all of those things that we had down there. And again, if you'll forgive me if I'm being a little choppy, my recall. What I will say is, along with the facilities that they had there, with what we had to work with, there just wasn't much work with. We were crammed into our units. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of ways to cope that I guess wouldn't be appropriate. A lot of people found themselves digging themselves into holes and regressing in their treatment down there. I suppose it's visible, the trauma on me. Maybe you can see it. I have to apologize. What I will say is there were a few group disruptions. And from those group disruptions, I found myself wanting to try and present through policies. I found myself filing grievances, found myself trying to express to our department here back home what we were dealing with, trying to work with them to make things better. These issues were easily fixable, it seemed like, and in trying to have sensible conversations with the people that we were working with and with the contract monitors that were down there with us in Texas, I fell into just a bit more disappointment. There was a lot of preventing us from reaching the people that we needed to, a lot of obstructing our concerns from reaching the people that they needed to go to. The fact that I was interested in presenting policies to some of the contract monitors, at one point in time, a comment was made that it was just simply cute. And I found that to be extremely offensive, trying to approach issues reasonably and logically. And there seemed to be a constant effort against that. While I was attempting to present, I began noticing patterns of obstruction. I began trying to find different ways to communicate to folks, to tell them not just what I was saying, but the people that were watching me attempt to communicate the messages that they were trying to pass to me also. Obviously, we find ourselves having trouble articulating exactly what's happening for a myriad of reasons. Part of it is the guilt that comes with knowing, we put ourselves in that situation. The other part is the way that people look at us when we try and have sensible conversations or engage in discourse. What I found worked was writing letters at that time, having materials sent in to try and further my efforts. I have to apologize. It's a little bit difficult still. I'm not exactly covering the materials that I was hoping to cover. Essentially, I was able to organize a lot of our group concerns down there, and I was able to document the difficulty that we had. And a lot of those materials I have available for reference. So I guess I don't really need to get into them right now. You're more than welcome to view them later on. I'll give you an opportunity to find a link, look at them. From that facility, if you please take that sentiment and the obvious emotional impact that comes along with it, and move that to 7 months into the future, to where people have been coping the best that they've had. There's no shortage of trouble to get into. What there is a shortage is opportunities to spend their time constructive. There's no programs. The most well-behaved inmates that were sent down there have essentially been enjoying a disco for 7 months at this point in time. And we're really just kind of doing what we can. Everybody's coping in different ways. Person might be able to imagine those 7 months pass. And IDOC signs a new contract to the Eagle Pass Correctional Facility, which is about 1.5 miles away from the Rio Grande, right there on the Mexican border. It's an immigration facility that's been converted to house us. We're being housed 8 people in a cell when we get there, same thing. The facility wasn't prepared for us. There's bug infestations, there's avian droppings, there's rodent carcasses. There's essentially there's no policy, no exact operating procedures a person can reference. We're given we're given conflicting sets of instructions for how we're supposed to compose ourselves as inmates and the way that we're supposed to engage with the facility and the staff. We find ourselves having a hard time navigating the policies that they give us. At this new facility, we don't get outside for a few months. We're 8 months without having a good majority of our property, our photos, our comfort items, our books, the things that people use to do their time constructively. Our property arrives, more inmates start arriving from Idaho. Eventually this facility ends up holding 650 people, and it's more of the same. I'm led to believe, again, these were all, hand-picked inmates, well-behaved inmates, a lot of people that have stayed out of trouble in IDOC. Again, no opportunities to get in trouble, not very much opportunity to be constructive. And at this point in time, I'm writing a lot of letters. I'm compiling a lot of presentations. I've been documenting issues for months and months and months. And I've been documenting the struggles that I have presenting these issues. And we were fortunate down there in that we had some media coverage, some interest, brought some attention to the issues down there. I was able to make a few contacts and start shuffling presentations back and forth. Apparently, I was successful with my presentations because after literally paying to understand what rules we were to be operating by in Texas, I found the right people to contact, and I contacted those people, and I presented our group issues down there, and they heard my call. And a month passed by before they responded to it, and when they did, they said, "Yeah, we looked into your issues, and now we were told this story, and it doesn't really coincide with what you were told." And a week after that, I was brought back to Idaho. When I was brought back to Idaho, I had a disciplinary offense modified from when I was down there. The offense at that time was creating a disruption. At one point in time, I'd refused to cell up with some other inmates who were upset with the conditions. We had staged a little protest that was processed essentially as a misdemeanor might be. When I was brought back to Idaho, I was thrown in the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, and from the Idaho Maximum Security Institution, I kept reaching out and trying to present the issues that I had down there. Here at Max, I spent about 6 months fraternizing with the other 16 inmates that we socialize with on a regular basis. We have units of, 64 people on a unit, and they're divided into 4 sections. So 16 people that I socialize with. 6 months pass, and in a 10-day period of time, 14 people of the 16 people that I'm socializing with are involved in acts of violence. I was one of those people. That brought me back to ADSEG. So now I've gone from being one of IDOC's most well-behaved inmates, shipped out of state, doing my best to present issues reasonably on behalf of my fellow residents. Brought back to Max for that, engaged in some disruptive behavior. I hold myself accountable for that, find my way into ADSEG. My experience in ADSEG is a lot of neighbors that have experienced similar trauma to myself. There's a diverse set of issues, obviously, as diverse as you can imagine, behavioral wise, people's histories, whatever it is that led them to prison, whatever it is that led them to make the decisions that they made. They're housed in Idaho Maximum Security Institution right now with myself for a long period of time. And we sit back here and we ask what we can do. We ask what opportunities are available. How do we address our trauma? How do we engage in constructive behavior? And to put it simply, there's nothing to offer. The best we can hope for is if you're within a few years of your release, possibly if you're within a year, maybe you'll get let into a class, because the parole board needs to make sure that you take that class before you get out. But I have a hard time believing that a 6-month class with a few hours a week for myself 7 years from now, when my fixed sentence is up, is going to erase all of the trauma that I'm having a hard time just relaying to you today. I'm having a hard time believing that it wouldn't be constructive to offer people tools when they enter prison to do their time constructively, to find ways to assist them. I don't want to be released back out into the community and run the risk of going through mental health problems again and harming someone again. I think there's certainly some room for improvement there. There's some opportunities there to look at what we're doing, maybe navigate the science or take a better look at it, and to address the trauma that happens in prison. Instead of giving classes to cope with what happens, with the violence that's around us, the different experiences that we have with whatever issues brought us here to begin with, we're giving the number to the suicide hotline. And I really don't know if much more needs to be said than that. Richie, if you could give me a minute, please.
Absolutely, Patrick. This is really special, folks that are on here. Patrick, we're indebted to you and Chris as well to share so candidly with us. So many people don't get to hear this. Those of us who are on, who work with me at the ACLU, we hear from you, but we don't live it like you do. And your speaking today is extraordinarily powerful, and that's coming through in the questions that we're getting. We're getting some really great questions from folks, and maybe Patrick, I don't want to you asked for a minute. I don't want to steal any final comments that you have, but if you want, I can ask some of those questions, and we can hear what you think.
Yeah, if you give me just a second to say,
Sure.
I apologize for my composure at this point in time. If you are interested in a more detailed version, or some of the experiences and seeing some of the experiences that I've had for yourself, I have procured a platform to make them available. If you don't mind if I share, Richie, where they can find that. There's a website you can go to. It's the Book of Irving, 82431.com. There are presentations in there that I would recommend you towards. One of them is Exhausted Grievances and Summary for legal and investigative purposes. And that is one of the ways that I recommend, and what I presented to the Idaho Law Review, how other peoples can document their experiences and share those. To look at what we're dealing with, something as simple as trying to get an entire facility's dining utensils sanitized. There's a presentation called The Battle for Dish Soap at Eagle Pass, and that would be followed up with violations of Texas minimal jail standards, the Eagle Pass Correctional Facility. And just to give you an idea of some of the bureaucratic red tape that we face, that we have to unravel just to be able to communicate the issues we have in our environment that are conducive to helping us find constructive ways to behave. It's awfully hard to improve our behavior if we're so focused on our environment and we're spending so much time just trying to survive and trying to find ways to cope and find ways to not get sick in the conditions that we're experiencing. There's some understanding to be had there. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to view that, I would deeply appreciate it. And hopefully those materials can explain a little bit better what I was attempting to explain to you today.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I want to, we have just a few minutes remaining. We have about 8 minutes remaining. I think that's enough time to share at least one or two of the questions with both of you and see what you have to say. Let me start with this one just because it gives a flavor of how your words are being received today. This question says, first, thank you both so much for this candid discussion. I'm in awe of your ability to speak to your difficult personal history and to the issues in the system, all with admirable, balanced tone. I find this really inspiring and something that more people should be able to see and listen to. Questions. Is there one piece of Idaho legislation that would be most sensible to focus on changing? What kind of therapeutic resources would be best for you to have access to? What are your IDOC numbers so that we can email you through JPay? And Patrick, are you able to email?
Yeah, I can be found on JPay. My IDOC number is 82431. My contact information is available on that link I provided. To answer what would be most helpful therapeutically, I make no shortage of attempts to enrich my human capacity. I've written over 1,800 letters to people asking to be involved in projects one way or another. I attempt to perform service work with the people that are around me. I absorb materials as they come through my house. Occasionally, books will arrive throughout the community, and all that's very much appreciated. What would be more appreciated is if there were opportunities that my case manager could provide for me at my facility. If there were maybe pamphlets that could be passed out once in a while. If maybe we have an electronical system called JPay, if materials could be made through JPay, if once in a while they came through and said, hey, you know what, guys, if you want to do a good job, we have these opportunities ahead of you at some of our other facilities. Would you like a description of that? Pardon me for taking a tone on that, but those would be extremely beneficial. It'd be really helpful, and not just for myself, but for people around me, to show them, hey, you know, you don't have to spend, for this particular facility, you don't have to spend your duration here. You don't have to top out your sentence. There are things you can do. You can learn a trade at some of the other facilities. Hey, if you're having a hard time, here's a workbook to work through. Little things like that. Chris, I'm sure Chris has some feedback on this question as well that would be valuable.
Chris?
No, thank you, Patrick, for sharing this time with me. And so absolutely, thank you for the question. My IDOC number is 51937, and I would welcome any input, suggestions, ideas. So thank you for that question. Yes, in my article, it's really focused around a specific piece of legislation, and that's Idaho Code 19-2513, which is the unified sentence. And I mentioned it, I go into depth in the article, but I think that it can be tweaked, it could be rewritten, but we need to emphasize rehabilitation. We need to emphasize the value of people, their ability to change, the value of restoration, and the way that investing in people can not only help put them in a better position to make amends with their victims and the community and the harms that they've created when possible, but it just sets the stage for so many more productive outcomes than focusing on retribution, which in my mind magnifies the damage that has been caused by crime and the people that have committed those crimes. So absolutely. And as far as specific treatments, I had an incredible experience with the cognitive self-change program. I'm not sure exactly why that doesn't exist. We do have programs, typically because the system is so overburdened. IDOC, from my perspective, they're in triage mode. There's such a high need to treat so many people, but they only have so many resources. So they've had to allocate those resources for treatment to people that are closest to release. So somebody comes in with a 10 or 15-year sentence, they don't really get to do formal treatment until they're a year from release. So what have we done in that 10 years, that 12, 15 years, however long that is prior to that? So I believe more treatment opportunities earlier, but obviously, again, we have limited resources. So how do we address that? Well, to me, it begins with responsible legislation, and it begins with intentionally sentencing people with the understanding that they're going to return to society, and what investment do we want to make in these people. And so I go in more in depth in my article, but I appreciate Patrick sharing that time with me. So that's what I have on that. So thank you.
Thank you both. We are getting close to the top of the hour. There are so many great questions, and I am just really gutted that we can't keep talking and hearing from you both.
Richie, if I could say, I'm also available for follow-up. I'm sure Chris wouldn't mind either. We could get to your questions by way of mail or JPay. Please don't be shy if there are things that we can answer. I think we'd both appreciate the opportunity to continue this discussion any way possible.
Great. That was just what I was going to ask you both. Is there's so many great questions that folks have. Some people that are doing research that they would like to hear more from you both. So you can see now on the screen their names, and just like Reginald Dwayne Betts has said in his poetry, this is a system that turns people into numbers, and their numbers are up there too that will help you contact them. I put those in the chat, as well as Patrick's website as well, so that you can find that there. We are at the top of the hour. There was a question about how can you access the articles. I think that was answered in the, it probably popped up on your screen, but the articles will be published in the Idaho Law Review's Symposium edition this spring. They'll appear both in the print edition and on the Law Review's website, which I will put in the chat as well if you haven't seen it in the Q&A. There was also a question about will the panel discussion from today be available to share. It was recorded, and I will get a copy of that at some point. I think that the ACLU of Idaho will be able to share this. And so watch on the ACLU of Idaho website and our social media to see when we're able to get this posted. It'll take a little while to convert the video, and then we'll have to find a place to put it. But I hopefully we'll be able to share this, and hopefully Patrick will be able to share this on his website as well once we get that video ready. So I want to thank you both so much, Patrick and Chris, for sharing with us today. It has a huge impact on me, even though I hear from folks who are imprisoned every day. And I am sure, gathering from these questions and all the people that are here today, that it's had a huge impact on everybody here. Professor Sanders from the law school wanted to say a thank you as well. So Professor Sanders, I'll give it to you for the final words here.
My thanks as well to both Patrick and Chris for joining us this afternoon. I don't know if you know how special it is for our students to get this type of perspective as they look to go out and become members of the legal profession. This is not something I got in law school. So I know how important it is, even if you're not doing this type of work,